This video is gonna be less detailed and more rushed because this year's been pretty weird. At the beginning of the year I moved into a new house after more than a decade at the previous one. Then I went to celebrate my late February birthday mid-March at a roller rink and fell directly on my right elbow. I had never broken a bone before, so it took a while to figure out it wasn't just a bruise and was actually broken, and it took even longer to exercise it to get its missing range back. Now you'd think that the daily routine of using splints along with painstakingly checking its progress would have given me a solid measure of time passage, right? Yet somehow April turned into August by the time I'd gotten most of its range back, and by then another semester of college was starting up again. All of this to say that this year was so busy and yet also went by so fast. I somehow watched like 13-ish anime that aired this year during everything going on though. I'm gonna try to be as brief as possible to try finishing this video by the time the year ends, so if my thoughts on some of these animes seem kinda short, it's because of that. Like last year's video, there are a couple of anime from the year prior that I watched only after I finished making the video, so I'll talk about them a bit here. The first one left over from last year is Vampire Dies in No Time. The main two characters, three if you count John, carry the show for me. Said characters are a pathetic gamer vampire who turns to sand from the tiniest things, a vampire hunter who's forced to house him, and the vampire's pet armadillo. There's many other characters, but I did not care at all, which feels weird to describe, like yeah, the main trio was 90% of my fun experiences with the show, but that's how it was. The more a scene focused on some combination of the main trio, the more I liked it, with pretty much no exceptions. Other notes I have on this are that the opening is a certified banger, and that I watched it subbed, as I do pretty much everything, but I've seen plenty of dub clips that are funny too. And just like with Uramichi Oniisan from last year, I love it when comedy anime are very funny in both sub and dub. The other anime left over from last year is Horimiya, which I watched both versions of, newer and older. I don't have much to say other than I love the art style of both versions, though it's good that this newer one adapted more material, despite the fact that I've heard it still skipped and omitted a bunch of stuff. These three characters are neat, but my biggest opinion on the series is that Miyamoto is kinda just the best. Struggles socially, doing his best to be happy, has sort of an androgynous design, pretty good character. The middle school flashback stuff was pretty emotional, and the self-reflection he does at the very end is very, very sad. Okay, now on to the 2022 anime. Kotaro wa hitorigurashi, or Kotaro Lives Alone. If I were to describe this in 6 words, it would be found family, but make it sad. I found out about this anime through fandom osmosis of, hey, did you see this sad moment? Only to watch it and find out that the whole damn thing is a compilation of sad moments. Despite the found family element, everything still has a sort of depressing air to it, knowing this 4-year-old has lots of issues he'll need to gradually work through over time. Small scenes like the school entrance ceremony make it sweet, but the anime as a whole is a lot more on the bitter side of bittersweet. Puchiseka, or Petite Sekai. The proportions are kind of wonky at times, even in the ending theme. The stiff chibi style can be cute a good amount of the time, but the stiffness really doesn't do it any favors, though it does lead to a couple unintentionally funny screenshots and clips. The comedy also varies a lot. Some episodes are forgettable, but a select few are neat. Though now that we have those anime-esque anniversary music videos, we don't even really need to cling to this as the only anime-adjacent material available anymore, so... Love Live Nijigasaki Season 2. The difference in Lanju, Mia, and Shioriko's storylines from what happened in All Stars is confusing. Lanju is so much less antagonistic, Mia as a result doesn't have much of a struggle with Lanju's demanding work schedule, and Shioriko's older sister's introduction and conflict plays out totally differently by making her a failed idol instead of an unknowingly condescending person. It warps Shioriko's conflict into a simple waiting for the clarification from her sister that she didn't regret being an idol. Speaking of weird conflicts, the Diver Diva episode with Ai's older sister figure lamenting over her lost childhood was so bizarrely handled. The scenes near the end tried to juggle the concepts of lost time, hurting others, rivalry, and re-inspiration way too quickly, and introducing a problem on this big a scale was really jarring to watch. Pretty much any time conflicts happened this season was either watered down or poorly handled compared to the previous Love Live installments. Hell, even just compared to its last season's troubles. But everything outside of the conflicts was neat, which feels weird to say. In a weird way, it felt like everyone was the most in character during the more relaxed scenes. Though the highlight of this season was Lanju defying physics by the pure power of singing Queendom at a toy ship to make it become unstuck somehow. It navigates through the entire festival they're doing, gets stuck right before the finish, Lanju sings about defying common sense, so it complies and cues the stage effects for her performance. It's so funny. Spy Family. The first and second cores aired this year, so I'm just saying everything in reference to both, by the way. Though I mean, well, what do I say that hasn't already been said? It was very cute. Found families in series are always a plus. The perspective often jumps between the three. It's very funny and keeps the concept of all three keeping secrets engaging to watch. The first ending and second opening's focus on the found family theming makes me happy. It's so sweet. What else was there? Oh my god. Kaguya-sama Season 3, Ultra Romantic. First and second season were amazing, and wow, whoa, third season is as well, I'm so shocked. I know it's been praised so much, but the wrap episode really was one of the best of the season. The animation shines in so many ways in such quick succession that it was one of those anime episodes I watched like a dozen times not even a week after it aired. It's even cooler knowing that most of this content in this part of the manga was presented literally, whereas most of it in these adapted scenes are reality warping. I really enjoyed this visual gag in particular. We see Shirogane and Chika in a tracking shot that looks like it could be in a music video, then a fisheye camera of a startled Hayasaka. Then it zooms out into this ridiculous setup of Hayasaka being addressed while on a moving cart, making the two tracking shots literal from both perspectives. Ah, it's great. I love it. The whole season, just as the others were, has creative and fun direction that's a delight to watch all the way through. And as I predicted after having read the manga before this season, they went for the school festival season ender, which famously had the season at the top of lmao for some time. After lots of fittingly elaborate setup, the confession finally happens. It's so very cute and a perfect way to end the season. The anime's visual flair makes the confession so vulnerable yet sweet from both perspectives and makes it feel like such a big accomplishment. Tomodachi Game. I watched this expecting it would be an edgy sort of mind game thing, and it was exactly that, to a sort of comical degree at first, especially with the very intense visuals of the first episode. Stuff like the friends versus money point was so exaggerated and polarized that it was impossible to take seriously, along with pretty much anything else. It's a bit of fresh air that it's not a death game, but rather a debt game, but the latter stuff of the season starts leaning so close into life-staking games, and it might just go down that road later on anyways. Other stuff I have to note is that the rumor game was a pretty cool concept, the mascot's silly, the opening's cool, but by the time I finished it, it felt like a waste of time, despite knowing full well I went into it just for a laugh. Except for the friends versus money thing at the beginning, it wasn't really comically bad, and kind of just became less entertaining as it progressed. I kept waiting for more comically bad things to come back, but they didn't really. It's kind of just like, oh, how'd he do it? Ooh, here's how he did it. Whoa, that's how he did it. Whoa. Shadow's House, Season 2. Since I skimmed through the manga when reading this arc, I didn't remember it going on for this long by the time I watched the anime. The season is entirely based on the long arc of the Robe-sama mystery, but even though the mystery gets a bit dragged out, the main character's dynamics kept things pretty interesting. Once the answer is finally revealed, things really start picking up again, as we're shown the consequences of what the two culprits have done, and the way it ties back into the act of rebelling against the house that spans across the series as a whole. Finally being able to see a different angle of those who had tried to survive the system of the Shadow House, and the ensuing conflict of whether to conform or rebel really ties the long arc up pretty well, and comes back full circle into what Emiliko and Kate had been working towards this whole time. Love Live Superstar, Season 2. For anyone that doesn't know Love Live, this is the first Love Live series that has broken the magical 9 rule, wherein each main Love Live group has 9 members. It had only 5, but then 4 first years were introduced for Season 2, which had me kinda doubtful. But pretty much right away, they were so endearing and silly that I couldn't stay mad. The first years having a mostly self-imposed fear of not meeting the expectations of a group that's had a head start on everything was pretty cool. It comes to a boiling point when the option of not having the first years perform in the Love Live competition is introduced by Sumire, who doesn't want to see Kuka have to go home if the group fails. It was so cool seeing the push and pull of the second years not wanting to hurt the first year's feelings, the first years not wanting to impose or drag them down, and all 9 of them wanting to sing together regardless. Song-wise, this one might be my favorite because of its peppy energy and animation, though I like this one's tune and rhythm, and I really love the ending theme yet again. There's this panning shot where everyone gives the next person a strawberry that ends with Kinako already having eaten her own, and these shots of each member trying out each other's hairstyles that are just so heart-meltingly cute. Look at them, they're just kind of vibing. Pop Team Epic Season 2. Second verse, same as the first. Although this time there's voice actor commentaries at the end of each episode, which I thought was pretty fun since the revolving door of voice talents each episode is one of my favorite parts of watching Pop Team Epic. Just as the first season did, there's many parodies in here. Some I understood, some I didn't. The Dora the Explorer and the visual novel parodies might have been my favorites. Though I gotta say, dedicating an entire episode to a Hellshake Yano sequel was perfection. I still have no idea how the hell they plan all that out. It's also cool that the final episode had a couple of songs. Both of them are pretty neat. The first song brought back the felt puppets and the deceptively cute tune paired with off-putting lyrics, and now it's stuck in my head like the Season 1 songs did. The second song has Popuko and Pipimi dancing in various art styles used in the season, which I just have to respect. I'd assume each animation was referenced from the human dancer, and seeing how different art styles do the same dance is really interesting. What's the saying? Life imitates art, art imitates life? Huh? Wait, isn't that me? Like the hair length and the blonde streak and... Uh-oh. Bocchi the Rock. Seeing an inspirational slice-of-life story play out from the viewpoint of the socially anxious character is very fun. Anything happens and she's like, damn it, I didn't study for the normal social interaction tests. I'm like, yeah, same. Any anime that isn't afraid to play around with its animation is a win in my book, and the variety of styles Bocchi's anime plays around with is really creative and sells her social anxiety really well. Though it almost feels like I'm underselling it if I didn't go into detail, which I don't have the time to do. The animation styles have been getting the attention they deserve, and I'm happy they're not being overlooked, even if the best I can do is just point at the clips on screen and go, look at this one. Look how cool that one looks. Look how silly that one looks, look at it. Speaking of underselling, I have pretty much no knowledge on the specifics of bands, and can't really speak on the little details and includes on that either. The stuff I can understand is very fun to watch though. I really like the first episode in particular. Chainsaw Man. I haven't read the manga for this, and I gotta say, watching Mob Psycho Season 3 and this in the same season really drew a contrast in spoiler etiquette between fandoms. I'd watched Seasons 1, 2, and half of 3 of Mob, with the closest thing to a spoiler reaching my ears having been that sunflowers made manga readers cry for some reason. But watching Chainsaw Man was basically like those puzzles at the end of Danganronpa Trials, where I had seen so many key plot points spoiled, and the only thing I didn't know was what order everything happened in. Luckily, I wasn't invested enough to mind. I hear it has good moments and such, but I'm watching this very casually for now. The strongest thoughts I have on Chainsaw Man so far is that I think these characters are neat. I hate these characters. Angel Devil is the best, and I'm so happy that each episode's ending theme is unique. Big emphasis on that last thought. Yes, I'm sorry for being that person, but did you know that about half of the ending themes are done by Vocaloid producers? There's other familiar names in the mix as well, and the way the ending themes complemented each episode is really fitting. These ones are my favorites, and this one is my absolute favorite because of the unexpected combination of John/Toboe and Cole Owl. John/Toboe being a really cool Vocaloid producer that does like songs that kind of have a kind of like a beep boop kind of sound to it, really scratches my brain. And Cole Owl is an animator that specializes in rotoscoping that has like a really cool style that like I looked at and I was like, is this Cole Owl? And it was Cole Owl. I'm sorry again for being like that person that like sits down with anime themes and is like, is this perhaps this producer? You can really tell that the style of this animator comes through. I'm sorry, I don't do it on purpose. Mob Psycho 100 Season 3. I watched seasons 1 and 2 as they were airing years ago, but despite loving them a whole lot, I wasn't able to verbalize what I liked about them that well. I feel like I've gotten a bit better at explaining what I like about things now compared to then, so when watching this season, something clicked in my brain and the hyperfixation set in. I ended up reading the finale of the manga halfway through this season to not get spoiled, and then even more clicked into place. I saw more details in the opening and ending visuals and lyrics and started working on portions of A and Bs to try waiting until the finale aired. And now I have way too many thoughts for what's supposed to be a relatively short video compared to the previous years. I'll be talking about this season specifically, but since the series as a whole has lots of foreshadowing and recurring elements, I'll be bringing up previous scenes when necessary. It's so very cool that season 2 ended with the big threat being defeated, only for there to be more arcs beyond that. I think it speaks to how Mob Psycho as a whole is always a series to tie up its loose ends. Every season ends by tying up loose ends, so it feels so fitting to have the final arcs do that as well, with the questions of, is Dimple still insistent on the God plan? Will the Telepathy Club disband without doing anything? And will Mob confront his emotional trauma coming to the forefront? Someone even pointed out how it's sort of the reverse of the beginning of the series. Of course, you're not thrown into the deep end of the pool right away though. You get eased into the Divine Tree arc by seeing daily life play out with the business, Serizawa as a new employee, and Mob planning for a school festival as Dimple tries drawing attention to the Divine Tree as Mob's big shot towards stepping up as a leader of the cult. After what seems like a casual conversation about it, you gradually see things go wrong as an unnerving being resembling the drawing of Mob on the flyers steps up as the acclaimed god who made the tree. Everyone in town gets brainwashed in a way that doesn't alter their demeanors while making them loyal to the tree. And from there we get the confrontation that's been bubbling under the surface for so long. A conflict between Mob, who's been wanting to seem normal, and Dimple, who just can't understand why someone with that much power won't so much as admit he made the tree. Even the gradual way this arc builds to its conflict is so very fitting for Dimple, as after his initial defeat he hovers around Mob as a sort of devil on his shoulder, trying to get him to step up to the position of a god. And as the series goes on, instances of genuine concern for Mob are mixed into his constant attempts at persuasion. And in this arc too, it's only after multiple attempts at asking Mob if he'll do something about the Divine Tree and being dismissed that he cracks and goes to do it himself instead. The ensuing conflict is pretty tragic, as Dimple hides away with his power stolen from the tree, and Mob insists that they should talk directly. They both hit each other where it hurts, Dimple getting under Mob's skin with brainwashing his loved ones, and Mob refusing Dimple's concept of godhood without considering such a long-lasting goal would be that important to him. The scene where Dimple goes into a fight-or-flight sort of mode is so great, especially the bit of voice acting and the panicked scream as he thinks Mob is about to wipe him out entirely. The shirt Mob is wearing under his uniform being revealed brings the two from being at each other's throats to talking casually, and the de-escalation being caused by it is so fitting. Mob had been pleading to hear Dimple's true thoughts, and hearing something so mundane as "your shirt looks lame" brings the two to a topic they can finally talk honestly about. They both pause and reflect on themselves and the other to realize how their communication went so horribly wrong. Dimple realizes how he had wanted someone to genuinely acknowledge his existence as a companion, and going back through this arc makes it kind of painful, as before he self-reflects on his goals, he seems so desperate. It almost feels like he's trying to show off to Mob, like, look what I've achieved, isn't this great? And since he mentions the goal feeling empty, it feels like he's trying to justify having made it this far to himself by trying so much to convince Mob that it's impressive. Upon Mob's realization that this goal meant so much to Dimple, and Dimple's realization that unquestioned godhood felt empty, the two reach an understanding and start to head home. But Psycho Helmet entities created by the Divine Tree start to appear independent of Dimple's control, with the realization that the tree demands its power be paid back starting to dawn on him. Dimple's literally shown the bad influence he could have had on Mob, as the pervasion of abusing such strong power becomes sentient and keeps trying to sacrifice Mob as nothing but fuel for that power. What especially breaks me is the fact that Dimple realizes this and admits to abusing his power and genuinely praises Mob for how humble he is. Rewatching the scenes in the tree made me realize that Mob had immediately gotten Teru out of there upon realizing the tree's threat, and later when Dimple realizes the tree is acting on its own and threatening Mob, immediately acts to keep Mob safe and get him out of there. And on top of that, the fact that he uses hypnotism to do it makes it seem like Dimple knows Mob would refuse to leave him alone with such a threat. So, you know, I cried. Wait, hold on, that was a lengthy analysis of just one arc alone. I gotta up the pace here. Wait, but I want to give props to the voice acting first, before I forget. Aki Otsuka's voice acting as Dimple, Psycho Helmet, and God Dimple with different variations of his voice was a really cool touch. It keeps Psycho Helmet's identity a kind of vague question at first, if the person watching can't exactly identify the voice. I have kind of an ear for identifying voice actors in anime, and even I was sort of questioning whether or not the voice I was hearing was the same voice actor as Dimple or not. His voice as Psycho Helmet is deep and monotonous and kind of drones as he talks.
真珠は皆さんの思いの力で成長し、世界に幸福をもたらします。
And his voice as God Dimple has an added sense of grandeur, as he projects a lot more.
目の前にいるのはかつてない強敵だぞ。それじゃ指でちょいとついただけで終わっちまうぞ。
It adds a new layer of narrative adaptation-wise, as when trying to talk to Teru as Psycho Helmet, his normal Dimple voice starts peeking through between attempts to brainwash him, going between his disguise and his overconfidence in this plan.
心の拠り所を提供してやってるんだ。霊体のままじゃ信者たちに見えねえからよ。
And then later on, as he talks to Mob, Dimple drops the formalities in his speech entirely and speaks as he normally does, but still with the Psycho Helmet voice.
サイコヘルメット教に入れよ。これから俺様とシゲオのツートップで盛り上げていこうぜ。
But I'm rambling too much. I might put a compilation of clips in the description to show what I'm talking about better. But okay, now on to the rest of the season. The Telepathy Club arc is relatively relaxed, with 2 episodes, the latter of which includes lots of great animation. Mob Psycho 100 has always had a good balance of regular daily life intertwined with the irregular supernatural happenings, and this arc blends those together really well. We get a sort of down-to-earth story of the Telepathy Club's last big event together, as they realize the club won't be the same since Tome and Kijibayashi are graduating soon. Takenaka, the club member we saw run off at the very beginning of the series, returns as it's revealed through an ear-ringing telepathic signal that he's been a telepath all along, and he reluctantly agrees to help the club with their final group activity. This arc explores Tome and Takenaka's characters in particular, as we see the initially uncooperative Takenaka take more of an interest in helping the others out, and Tome's avoidance of trying beyond a certain point revealed to be a conflict of chasing a fantasy despite her enthusiasm being mismatched compared to the rest of the club. Takenaka gradually steps forward and becomes more active, and Tome starts shrinking back. She's seen as being difficult, but until now she's been pretty much the only Telepathy Club member to actually care about this stuff, and being met with such sudden ambition from the other members almost seems like pity. Things take a sort of wacky yet wholesome turn when they actually do end up meeting aliens, who turn out to be sort of similar to the Telepathy Club themselves, as the previous tension everyone had fades away into relaxation and leisure. Between the previous Divine Tree arc and the following final arc, this arc serves as a good breather, since the other two are so heavy and emotional. And as I said earlier about loose ends, it answers the question of whether the Telepathy Club would end up pursuing the goal Tome had always been speaking of. Good arc. And then, well, how about that final arc, folks? Ever since the very beginning, the topic of Mob's emotional trauma and repression had been kind of the elephant in the room, and I love how it comes to be the final conflict to everything. As %% tears up the city going towards a one-sided goal, a variety of characters that Mob's influenced over the series work to protect Mob's values while trying to reach him in his inner thoughts. Teru keeps Mob's pacifistic morals intact compared to their very first conflict, as he answers the problem of "you have to hurt me before my power hurts the citizens" by evacuating the citizens with his power and awakening Mob's consciousness inside his mindscape. Toichiro and Sho introduce the conflict that if Mob's power can't be contained, just as Toichiro's wasn't during his own outbursts, someone might try taking the brunt of it and being seriously hurt, if not just killed. Mob starts to be able to control himself just a little bit, but it's really strained. Ritsu gets to the core of the issue by addressing the mutual trauma that he and Mob shared as kids upon %%'s first awakening, realizing that both he and Mob have been trying to take measures to protect the other instead of talking honestly about what happened. And then I thought, hey, wait a second, maybe I'll cry upon rewatching the series and seeing that time and time again, Ritsu had been trying to talk to Mob about the incident and his repressed stress, but Mob's closing the conversation every time thinking that he shouldn't trouble Ritsu only stressed the two out even more. It's such a well-written sibling dynamic. Both of them clearly care and worry for each other, but they create more of a distance with their self-imposed high standards of how they should be. Ritsu going, I'm his little brother, so why am I not as strong as him? What's wrong with me? And Mob going, I'm his older brother, yet he's hurt because I couldn't control my powers. What's wrong with me? Ritsu's destructive inferiority complex had settled down back in the Claw arc, as Mob's forgiveness despite Ritsu's misguided mistakes and the measures he takes to ensure his safety makes Ritsu realize how antagonistic he had been. But Mob's emotional repression, despite Mob having grown more as a person, had still been kept hidden, along with the trauma. Ritsu takes the leap and does what he hadn't been able to do before. Instead of complying with Mob's insistence that he has everything under control, he insists upon the issue and addresses how much the trauma had been hurting the two all this time. Ritsu shows off his newfound power and shows Mob that the two can meet eye to eye now and work to recover together instead of separately. Afterwards, Reigen shouts that he has something important to say, something that needs to be addressed as he tries to reach Mob. Mob had been struggling against himself in his mindscape, the two sides of him, the powerful and powerless, at odds as to who is the true version of himself. The power side of Mob is fed up with being repressed for so long, as the normal Mob disintegrates away in a beautifully animated paper-like animation. Reigen gets thrown around and injured trying to make it in time, but the power side of Mob refuses to listen, thinking that both Reigen and the normal side of Mob will just try repressing him again. Dimple's reappearance lets Reigen get a foot in the door, and Reigen admits that he doesn't have powers and had been lying all this time. It shocks the power side of Mob so much to hear who he thought was a liar to be so honest, and this moment is so well done where the power side of Mob stares Reigen dead in the eye waiting for elaboration. He stopped to listen, but doesn't talk as to not give Reigen an easy out that the normal Mob might do. It even takes Reigen aback as his eye contact wavers as he takes some time to continue explaining. Reigen tells the truth about not having powers, nor knowing what they're really like. He'd realized it when trying to reach Mob, and admits again to not understanding the weight his words held to his emotionally confused disciple. Throughout the series, we see a few strong instances of Reigen realizing bit by bit how he as a mentor makes mistakes and fails Mob at times, and having to make up for it. But even so, Reigen is someone who is able to give grounding advice that someone with such complicated powers was able to take to heart. Reigen realizes the struggle that Mob is having with himself, and explains that both sides of someone can have an unexpected sort of merit. Dimple's reappearance introduces this concept, since it was the normal Mob who believed in him to keep him from disappearing, but the powerful Mob that created enough energy to bring him back physically. The concept then continues with Reigen, that even the lie Reigen had kept up and the powers that Mob had dealt with led to immense growth and self-reflection on both ends over time. Maybe there doesn't have to be just one side or the other side of Mob that fight for control and repress each other. Since there's been people out there who have accepted both sides of him, maybe he can accept himself as well. Both sides of Mob finally see eye to eye. The power side of him, initially hesitant and hung up on trauma, being met with the reassurance from the normal side of himself, that even if things so emotionally weighted as the confession don't work out, that he will be okay. Finally calms down, Mob makes his way to confess to Tsubomi with a single sunflower, and gets rejected, as she doesn't see their relation as romantic. And this was so perfect. Instead of feeling obliged to go with the easy his crush likes him back ending, it goes for a different angle. Tsubomi had been noticing him across the span of the series, but it hadn't never explicitly been in a romantic sort of way, and characters like Misato and Dimple even point out that she's pretty closed off to those around her. She has been growing as a person off screen into someone who's a bit more considerate, but the writing makes sure not to misconstrue that into an obligation that she has to say yes to romance. Never does anyone consider throwing Tsubomi into the eye of the storm to give a yes to the confession, because it's not about that. Mob's been asked why he likes Tsubomi, and has to reflect on that and eventually realizes that she represented an ideal of self-acceptance that Mob had been trying to achieve. He had been at odds for so long trying to figure out what his self was, what side of him is real, but lacked the self-reflection to understand it entirely, and latched onto a crush on Tsubomi, since she didn't see him and his power as separate. It turns into self-improvement, however, as he joins the Body Improvement Club, at first to impress her, but then to simply improve himself, as he's shown to still be an enthusiastic and active member of the club even after the rejection happens. And so even though he had been so fixated on confessing to her, the curtains are pulled back as the goalpost is revealed to be self-acceptance in a way that ties together so narratively perfectly that I'm writing this much about it. This much about it. Despite that essay of analysis and thoughts on everything, there's still thoughts and observations that are left over that I'll just put on the screen and you can pause to read it. Because, like, honestly, this video is so long as is. There's so many instances where I was typing the script up going, wow, this takes up more than half of the video compared to all these other anime that I have sort of brief thoughts on. Maybe I should shorten it. I didn't. Even though this is just a section of the video and there isn't really much of a segue between the different anime, I kind of want to say something to finish this section of the video off. But I don't know what to say, so like, go watch my AMV of the third opening, I guess. Yoru wa neko to isho, or Nights with the Cat. This one's a short anime about daily life with a cat. The entire show is just silly things that this cat does. That's it, that's the entire show, just lighthearted cat antics. And so, you know, thinking this might just be the best anime of the year. You know, maybe. Ooh, the video's over. Ooh, I had cool things for the other year videos, like talking about different things and the openings and stuff, but I don't have something for this year because the Mob Psycho season was so bloated and so long, and I want to finish before the end of the year, so I will just leave it here. Thank you for watching!